Recently, while going through some old beater Redline castings that I have, I came across this old 442 police cruiser, obviously a little beat up, and I thought this would be fun for a straightforward restoration. I love the police cruisers that Todd does over at Texas Diecast Customs, and I those are always really elaborate. This isn't going to be one of those. This is going to be a very simple car. I'm not adding a bunch of detail to it or anything like that. If you want to see some amazing police cruisers, check out his channel. And I've wanted to try the Brightvision hot swap bearings that have come out recently. So this seemed like the perfect one to try that on. I had a hard time getting the interior out of here, which should have indicated to me there was a little problem. The glass is a darker blue glass. It's not a clear. I mean, it's transparent, but it's not, just clear. It does have the blue tint to it, and that was hiding some cracks in the windshield. And so this was wedged in there pretty well. I was able to get it out, and my concern was, there you see it. I mean, it's intact, but there's some cracks in the windshield right there on that, it would be the passenger side lower front section. And those concerned me, particularly because I can't get a blue replacement glass like this, or at least not easily. I could go on eBay, try and find a different casting with good glass, that kind of thing, but I'm not that patient. So there you see it. It's not terrible. The blue light on the top is messed up a little bit, so I sanded that down. And then I brought Gauzy into the mix. I figured if I do a nice heavy coat of Gauzy on this, it can save that glass. So I cleaned up the glass as much as I was comfortable doing. Yeah, there you see me popping the little bubbles that are in the Gauzy. I cleaned it up as much as I was comfortable doing without risking cracking it further, or worse yet, having a chunk fall off. So I dipped it in the Gauzy, soaked it in there actually, to be honest, hoping it would get into the nooks and crannies and really fuse this together. And so that was the first thing I did on this build, because I thought, well, if that doesn't work, I'm going to have to convert this somehow to just a regular 442, get a regular glass, or find a way to get a replacement glass for it. But that worked really well, in my opinion. So then I cleaned up the casting a little. Again, since this is a Redline restoration, I didn't want to get too carried away cleaning up the casting. The rear quarters are rough on these. Basically where the roof line meets with the back rear quarter, it's kind of rough. I cleaned that up a little, not excessively, but I just wanted to have a little smoother look. I didn't want it to be really jagged. And the casting, once you take that heavy coat off, it was rough. But sent that off to paint, basically. And then it was time to cut off these old wheels so I could get it ready for the Brightvision hot swap bearings. So I get these out of the way. And before I do anything else, I thought, well, let me go over the areas of this base that are rough. I wash it first, and then I went over these areas with the Molotow 2mm chrome pin. Just brightening it up, making it look nice and fresh. And as you know, Molotow takes quite a while to dry. So while I set that aside, and since the body itself at this point I had hit with its Krylon specialty lacquer rattle can paint, it's just, there's nothing fancy. It's not a Spectraflame paint on this one. It's just white. I had ordered replacement decals from Second Chance. As usual, the Second Chance decals are second to none when it comes to being able to Use these things easily. You throw them in the water, and as you see there, I use a sponge. I put the decals on the sponge. I use microset, microsol. But the decals amaze me at how quickly they're ready to go. So once those are on and off to dry, it's time for the hot swap bearings. As you can see, there's a little slit in the side of the bearings so they can slip over the axle. You don't have to remove the axle. You don't have to do anything fancy with the axle. Well, this is sped up to 10 times normal. And at least with this set of axles on here, those bearings didn't just drop onto the axle. They had to be forced. The opening had to open up a little wider so they would go over the axle, and then they stay in place. And I bumbled and fumbled, and this was an incredibly frustrating experience. If the axles are a little thinner on other ones, I'm sure it's a lot easier. But at least this particular set of axles seemed a little thick. And yeah, you didn't even get to see me put all 4 axles on because it was difficult. And for someone that actually has just bearings, printed bearings, that I use a straight pin to put on, and the ease with this axle on this particular casting, I really regretted that I just didn't create my own axles and use my own bearings. But I wanted to give the hot swaps a try. I will give them another try in the future on something with thinner axles. The only reason these spin is because the axle itself spins. The bearings pinch so tight on the axle, it's not like the bearing spins like it does on other applications with bearings. So maybe I'm just clumsy. Maybe I know I'm not as skilled at doing these little tiny things, handling little tiny parts as others are, because I'm old and I bumble and fumble. But once they're on, once the wheels are on, they look great, and it does roll because the axle itself turns. They seem to be designed actually for more of an older style Redline axle. This seemed to be a thicker axle for some reason. But if the axle was thinner, I'm sure it would have been a dream to put them on. This wasn't that. But fortunately, they're on. There's the casting. I'm happy with the results. It goes together pretty well. After doing all the turntable shots and everything, I realized I really need to touch up those screws with some silver paint. But at this point, I was just happy to have this thing together. Again, it's just a rattle can restoration. The decals were great. The red lines look great on it. And it does somewhat roll. So there you have where we started. An old beat to hell red line. Not too terrible, not great. A new set of decals, freshen up the glass, throw a new set of red lines on there. If this had original bearing wheels on it or cap style, it would have been a much more pleasurable experience. The rattle can paint, again, the rattle can lacquer white. I went over that with the new clear I'm using. I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. I mentioned it in another video. Wilmer, I believe, is the name of it. It was recommended to me on Facebook recently, and it works wonderfully over the lacquer coats and over the decals. As you can see, the Gauzy did a decent job saving that glass. The blue light on the top, even though I did sand it down a little, I did end up touching it up with a little tiny bit of Tamiya clear blue on some areas that still seem to have a little white to them, if that makes sense to you. It's like still a little rough area. That definitely helped. So there you have it. I hope you like this build. Um, yeah, that's all I got. Everybody, thanks for watching these videos. Stay safe and healthy out there. Catch you in the next one.